River Shaman Ramblings podcast, where I do a lot of rambling, and we talk about such things as magic, shaman magic to be precise, how terrible chocolate ice cream is in your red wine, unless you mix it up so it looks just right, and it's really actually quite nice now. You can't hear me swirling it, but I'm swirling it in my glass. We're going to be discussing a vision that I had a few years ago, and I wanted to open up today's story with something that we had just learned from Jordan Peterson, actually. We were watching a lecture of his on YouTube where he is talking about, I guess it's the best way to defeat a narcissist. Mm-hmm. It's what drives a narcissist crazy. The sum of the video was summed up and entitled something like, living well, being successful, and being happy is the best way to drive a narcissist mad, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. Which I have experienced that. You remember how everything hit the fan when I got married and got a big old house? Mm-hmm. Oh, did things explode. Part of the points he made was when you're recovering from a narcissist, if you engage with a narcissist, they will do things to trick you into reacting emotionally because that takes your power away and gives them power over you and makes you, his words, dance to their tune. Mm-hmm. One of the things he said was not to try to always vindicate yourself. Learn the art of silence. Don't always give in to the feeling of going onto the top mountaintop and going, I'm innocent and here's why. The narcissist was mad. Some of that did kind of apply to the podcast, so I was thinking about it while we were listening to it. I decided that, no, I'm going to keep on because, number one, none of those people in my life that said and did the things to me that has caused part of the reason for the podcast will ever hear this podcast. Mm-hmm. They're either dead or they don't care. If they do care, then that's on them for not getting a life. Two, the other reason for the podcast is that I'm putting information out there for other people in my position. The life-saving night I had when I found that anthropological article by Frank Speck, backing up everything I had ever been taught or just figured out on my own growing up that people told me I was crazy for. That article gave me so much firm footing for myself that I had been needing for the past 40 odd years, that why wouldn't I put this out there for someone else who may need to hear it? Mm-hmm. 3, I'm working through this stuff. This is a healing journey. The entire podcast point says that it is a healing journey, and I'm inviting you to walk along with me. But it's a healing journey, which is part of why I end up talking a lot about something I've experienced and seen and done, on top of imparting the information. And that, of course, also plays on the fact that people have forgotten that one of the reasons why people tell you their personal stories when you're sharing heartache is you're relating to each other. Mm-hmm. If you're doing it in a healthy manner, you're not trying to overpower the other person's story. You're letting them know they're not alone. You're empathizing. And this is just an important life skill.
Yeah. Or emphasizing.
Emphasizing.
Yeah, emphasizing as best you can. Just because you haven't been through the exact same thing doesn't mean that you can't find some common ground of it. You know, I've never been in that kind of situation before. The closest that I've been to something like that is this, which is not the same, but understanding how I was in that situation gives me a limited understanding and, more importantly, empathy into what you're going through or what you're telling me right now. Now, it's not a competition. It's, I hear you. I am doing my best to relate. You are not alone.
Not to mention, some of the information from someone else's story can actually help you figure things out, which is the point to my stories. Mm-hmm. That, and let's face it, sometimes things are fun to talk about. Sometimes it's just really a lot of fun to rehash. Nothing comes to mind. I suck.
Rehashing the hash.
Yes, corned beef hash. Poor man's corned beef hash, which was my family recipe that I will share on here someday, but not today. No, today, after that note, finalizing with Jordan Peterson's advice is sound. It usually is. I have decided that going forward with why I'm doing this is a step beyond what he's warning against. Mm-hmm. Today, we're going to discuss and touch on very lightly Mongolian shamanism. Yes. Because something weird happened to me around 2000 something or other. 2007, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. Maybe it was before 2000. Anyway, it was somewhere around there. It was a very long time ago.
2007, I had pretty much entered your life at that point.
Okay, then it was way before that. I was in New York State, actually, when it happened.
Yeah, that's kind of far away from Florida.
I don't know how many years ago that was. It was a very long time ago. It was after the Y2K terror. Mongolian shamanism. So somewhere around between, I don't know, the Y2K problem and you said you came along when? 2007 or so? So somewhere in a space of about 5 years, give or take, because I know that I had moved up north where it happened at. I had a vision. I'm prone to those, even bound. You're going to be prone to those, even bound, because it's not you reaching out, it's things reaching out to you sometimes. Mm-hmm. First off, I have to establish that, yes, I had always been kind of aware that there are some tombs out there where I might have gotten buried in past lives. I was visiting cemeteries and picnicking in them before it was vogue again. Boscabello, the cemetery where I grew up, is beautiful, so how could you not want to spend time in it? Naturally, this means that there has been at least a few times in my life I have reached out to see, well, where was I buried? Can I sense my burials? I would like to find them. And I've always thought to myself, how cool it would be to find my own grave. Now, I thought this when I was studying archaeology. Find my own grave and stand there staring at myself.
I know, normal archaeologist thought.
Yeah, this is normal. So then one day, and I can't remember what happened, I just remember the vision. So I don't remember where I was. I don't know if I know that I was awake when it happened, but I can't tell you what I was doing or where I was at or anything. But I can tell you this. Someone started coming to one of my graves. It was such a strong visitation from this young, I'd say adolescent teenage girl. So maybe 13, 14, somewhere around there. She was coming into the grave, lighting it up, taking a mixture of mare's milk and blood, and feeding the corpse. The gravesite was kept with peaches and wine because it was well known that I really enjoyed those two foods, and I still enjoy my peaches, I still enjoy my wine. She would come, she was doing this over a period of days. I was able to see kind of through the line of sight that the corpse would have had it working functional eyes, that there was a well cared for round shield that had been polished and buffed and cared for like it was in really good condition, leaned up against the wall in my line of sight. Mm-hmm. And by it was a number of about 5 long spears, the kind that you pick up and throw, mm-hmm. which is my favorite weapon. I knew that there was a spotted cat skin to my left hanging on something or draped on something. I know that I was on some sort of raised platform or pedestal or maybe just a rock that was a little higher than the floor, and there was really soft furs around me. The furs might have possibly started out soft and had deteriorated, or perhaps they had been replaced. Who knows? I just had a sense of nice plush, nice layer of some really nice furs. Obviously laid on my back so that they could see. She would come in with the mixture, set the bowl to my right, so there was something there for her to set it to, and feed the corpse. You had told me that there was water dripping in my ear because I don't remember that at all, probably because of the operation. You
mentioned when we were getting to know each other, you mentioned this vision to me.
That's like a special form of water torture.
And there were people that were coming to the tomb and doing stuff and maybe moving you around or stuff. No. Okay.
No. What happened with that is, well, first let's go back to the tomb instead of jumping ahead.
Okay.
So the body inside the tomb was set kind of catty-cornered. So the door was maybe up to 45-degree angle to the right. So mm-hmm. the corpse is laying, picture the corpse at a 45 angle degree, facing the weapons, and then to the right at that angle is this door. The tomb itself was large enough that the girl could walk around in, but I had a sense that she was smallish, mm-hmm. but 14. I mean, it wasn't like you could freely move around. You could move around freely enough to care for the corpse, but you couldn't I don't know, do the dirty or something, you know. You couldn't do the deed of darkness. Deed of darkness.
In the tomb of darkness.
In the tomb of darkness. But it was well lit.
Oh, yeah, that's why you couldn't do the deed of darkness. Too much light. Too much light.
The deed of not in the darkness.
With the lights on.
I'm trying to remember any. I cannot, off the top of my head, remember other details. One day, maybe a week after this, where she had been coming nearly every day, just out of the blue. Now, I don't know if she had been doing it all along and all of a sudden the connection had gotten opened, because maybe she figured it out. Maybe it was just the stars had aligned correctly. Mm-hmm. Maybe my situation, which was not a good one, had pushed me over the edge. I don't know. I did confide the story in a certain community leader at the time, because I used to confide in him a lot of cool things like that. Mm-hmm. I was fond of him. One day, though, my visitors were not the girl. It was 3 men. They broke into the tomb as fast as they could, loaded everything very methodically like they had done it before, almost in an assembly line, as fast as they could into the back of this old army green truck. It was army green, and it didn't have a camper on the back. It had an open bed. Then they put me in the back. They kept me on the platform somehow and put me into the bed, or something like that. I was still on my furs. So that I got to see the terrain as I was carted away further deep into this hilly, mountainy area. It was very flat, mountainy area, and they drove, and it's like, bump, 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 I can see the sky, bump, 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 I can see that mountain over there, bump, 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 bump. Why isn't this car bugging down? Where are the roads? There are no roads, there are no roads. I was really confused, there were no roads. How was this truck making it? And that's the last of it. I don't know where I was put. I don't know how. I know that I was hurriedly put into a new area that was smaller. And cramped.
That was the bit that I got told with the 3 guys that had relocated you into a less desirable space.
It was less desirable. I was moved from a mansion to an apartment.
That had a leaky roof.
No. Was the dripping before? I thought the dripping was before I got moved.
I just know the dripping was contained in the story that you told me, and that the story that you told me had those 3 guys.
I didn't really get a good glimpse of the other 2. I knew they were there type deal, but you didn't get a look at them. The one guy was the one that handled me the most, and he was kind of stocky. Mm-hmm. Nice, beautiful color of light brown skin. They were very all business, so I couldn't begin to tell you their personalities or anything. It was all very rushed on their part. Mm-hmm. So my friend, term used very loosely, we had a falling out, a disagreement over something. I don't remember what it was. It's so unimportant. And his way of retaliating to people that he would disagree with is he would publicly call them insane in front of the entire community, and that's what he did to me. Mm-hmm. He took that event that I told him and told everybody, yeah, she expects to just wake up and come back to life, which was something I was expecting. This girl was coming there with this full expectation that I would come back to life someday, and she was feeding me like I was alive. That bled over, and I was expecting to come back to life. I mean, after all, I'm sensing this person coming to my tomb like I'm not dead or something, and I'm being fed and cared for as if I was not a bony skeleton bones. It bled over. That's my opinion. He publicly decried that, and it was one of the many things that people say that I'm crazy over was this particular vision and the feelings and the way I had interpreted what was going on. Fast forward years later. To the other night, actually, when I am just kind of futzing around and throwing out ideas and playing with things, and this is when I learned that my vision matched Mongolian Shamanism, and the terrain matched that region. The artifacts and the way things were laid out have actually been backed up by archaeological evidence. And that is why we are here. We are going to take this vision and we're going to dismantle it and go through it piece by piece, so that if you too are being harassed by a teenager who is trying to force blood through your teeth, and you have problems like me of staying up all night, you can blame her for being a vampire. Don't blame me. So let's step 1. Let's look at the girl. She was the catalyst. Mm-hmm. She comes in. I couldn't really begin to give you anything on what she looked like or anything. It was just a sense of there's this girl. So I couldn't even begin to tell you her clothes. I know she wasn't wearing flouncy dresses or lace or anything. It was just like a tea tuning, like typical what everybody wears. Even old clothes, if you look, we all have this T shape we put on our bodies. Mm-hmm. She was lithe and small and young. She is coming to the tomb to feed the corpse. That is Mongolian Shamanism. Did you find anything about that? Mini Cats has been on the quest now to back up everything I had to say. I had already looked into everything and everything's backed up, but I wanted her, because she's really good at this, to give us actual backup. So let's start with the girl.
I actually was looking up the shamanism itself, bit of its history, and the different forms that it takes and what rituals they tend to do, and unfortunately it did not carry over into burial rites.
That's okay. I have a backup prepared. Let's talk about the young caretaker. Age and gender. A young person or a girl. Visitation pattern. They didn't come every day, but visited regularly enough to maintain the site. This apparently matches a Mongolian ritual practice where caretakers would visit important burial sites on specific days, determined by lunar cycles. That was something else. She never spoke. Mm-hmm. It was done completely in silence, which is a dead person. What are you going to say to them? I get that. So I never questioned that. But when I started looking into it, it turns out that they don't. It's actually a ritual done in utter silence on purpose. Silence is maintained during certain sacred rituals to avoid disturbing the spirits.
Yeah, they're very big on that.
I get that. That's actually a worldwide phenomenon when you're in tune, is don't disturb the spirits. I can tell you what happens when you've got a disturbed spirit. It ain't pretty.
No, it's not.
They kept the burial site neat religiously. They groomed the body. They kept the hair groomed. It was neatly pinned back. I could feel like a couple of braids. But little braids, not big like I'm wearing today. They placed food and drink beside it. Mare's milk and blood on the lips. The feeding was always the last thing they did before leaving. They would clean up, they would do their thing, and then they would feed me. They wouldn't even salute and go on their way. Mm-hmm. My thought on that is, it would have been nice if I could have gotten, how are you tonight? How are you feeling, Spirit Curious Ghost Fox? Are you still dead? Do you think you're going to get better today? I am just saying. Disturbing the spirits is more disturbing. It was happening. The person, according to cultural context, was likely a designated caretaker. In Mongolian tradition, specific individuals from certain families were assigned the sacred duty of maintaining important burial sites. The role was often passed down through generations, which might explain why the person was young and they just suddenly started coming. Mm-hmm. Something happened so they took up the role. And perhaps because it was a new person, that's what caught my attention. Did mention that I did miss her visits after the move. Mm-hmm. I did kind of miss it. There was enough of a connection that you missed them when they stopped coming, suggesting some form of spiritual bond that formed through their ritual care. I think it was just more, it was really cool, but that's just me. There are scholarly references that back up these aspects, and I cannot say this word, Xiongnu, Xiongnu, Xiongnu. I don't know how Mongolian does, so Xiongnu, burial caretaking practices. There's Krubezi E. Martin and Giscard P.H. in 1996, funeral practices and animal sacrifices in Mongolia at the Ulgur period. The feeding rituals are backed up through Humphrey, Rituals of Death in Mongolia, Their Implications for Understanding the Mutual Constitution of Persons and Objects and Certain Concepts of Property. The silent ritual practices are backed up with funeral and memorial rituals of the medieval Mongols and their underlying worldview. I'm going to want to get that book. Maintenance of elite burials is backed up with B. Miller, Elite Xiongnu, Burials of the Periphery, Tomb Complexes at Takhitin, Kotgor, Mongolia, Altai. So everything we're giving here is definitely backed up.
I have a theory of what branch she might have been part of, which also gives a geographic location that I, of course, did not write in my note.
Tell me your theory, and then I'll... tell me your theory about the young caretaker.
Sounds like, from the general information that I have gathered, she might be part of the Dark Hat.
Dark Hat? Dark Hats? They were Dark Hats?
That is not how you say it.
It's got to be.
Obviously.
That cannot be correct, yeah.
But it's one of the two branches that were able to be recovered or survived the revival after the Soviet Union. And Dark Cat is also considered the one, because you're going to have debates on authenticity and traditions and something. It is said that they are considered the more unpolluted, unchanged tradition. They are more natural and simplistic in their practices.
It was very simple ritual, very simplistic.
And they also practice with direct communication with the spirits. It's also family-based, so you're describing her as a young girl who's new. Well, she likely might be new. She probably inherited the position from a family member, whether it was a mother or father or grandmother or an aunt. They tend to keep it in the family.
So she wouldn't have gotten it from the village idiot.
No, that would be their family thing, what they do.
That's kind of cool, actually. I mean, if the person were, like, freshly dead, I don't know if I would want to go in there and do it. I actually have often wondered, the poor girl, has she had to deal with a decomposing corpse instead of a pile of bones? Ew. No, thank you. That's why I didn't go into criminal anthropology, because gross. What I have in front of me here is she would have had to memorize the ritual. So that means that she learned the exact sequence of actions. The cleaning, making sure everything was in place. Maybe, possibly, she even shined the shield and polished the spears. I wonder if she kept them sharp. And then she would groom the body. You know, obviously everything's lit doing this. She would have had to light it to do it. And then she would offer the food and drink. The ritual silence, according to what I've got, being taught when and why to maintain silence to avoid disturbing the spirit, is another sign that this is something that had been drilled into her. Something else is a recognition of signs. Learning to identify signs that might indicate the deceased needed something specific. So if she could have heard me, I could have said, "Hey, what that peach over there?" I had a fondness for this mare's milk and blood mix, which we will get to, but there were these peaches and wine. What are the peaches and wine? I have a sense that it wasn't red wine like what I drink now. I drink red wine because that's good for your health, and the last time that I did a glass of red wine a day, I lost a lot of weight, and there was this fad of the red wine diet for a while, so I've recently got back on it to see if it helps. Emergency protocols, understanding what to do if the burial was threatened, which that will come later. According to anthropologist Caroline Humphreys' research on Mongolian ritual practices, these caretaker roles were considered a great honor, but also a serious responsibility. For a young person to undertake it, that's a pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. The young person would not have chosen this role. It would have been their destiny from birth.
Yeah, that's something that's common in the Dark Cat.
So, did you find out if most of them are female or male, or is there a ratio? There's the eldest child, the youngest child.
Just that it's in the family, and to be a shaman, it is a born calling. But if you're in a family of shamans, then
I don't guess you have a choice, do you?
Yeah.
What if you're not in a family of shamans, but it's clear that you've got shaman sickness, which is, by the way, when you are definitely an innate shaman and you're not answering the call, so your life sucks, among other things.
That does happen, and essentially that's when fresh blood comes into the...
So do they get adopted into these families, or they actually get adopted in?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, you're accepted as a apprentice or as a student. It would not be too hard to think that you would eventually marry in. Because why not?
Well, nobody else would be able to understand you. As someone that's on the fringe all the time, it's really hard to talk to people. I cannot talk about mundane matters more than, say, 30 minutes before I get glassy-eyed?
So yeah.
Did you find anything about their special attire? Did they wear anything special?
For the dark hats, antlers, and antler...
You mean like all those glorified shaman pictures we see everywhere?
Yeah, antler headdresses.
There's no way an antler headdress would have fit into that, too.
Skins.
Skins. I can see that possibly she was wearing skins, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cloth didn't seem like it moved freely, like cotton.
Probably not a huge, elaborate headdress.
No, her head was uncovered.
Okay.
According to what I have in front of me, she would not have worn no elaborate headdresses, but then again, how would it have fit into the tomb, really? because she might not have been a full shaman at her young age. No mirror-decorated costumes. Mirror-decorated costumes, and that sounds really interesting. Tell me about that part real quick.
They probably have it in the Dark Hat, but the Burn Berry At...
We are so sorry, everyone out there, that we cannot pronounce these words. We do not speak Mongolian or any of the dialects there.
But that is how it's spelled. The word berry with at, which is how I remember the word berry at.
Okay.
They are the most complicated and I guess you would say flamboyant in their ceremonies. So there was more descriptions about them. A mirror in the chest area and a mirror in the back area.
Was that to like make them invisible?
No, it was to ward off. Yeah, and it actually very specific, dangerous spirits, not evil, not dangerous deities, dangerous spirits. That's what the mirrors were for.
I don't think she had any mirrors on her. She would also not have had a ritual drum or large instruments, and no, she did not, because she came in to feed and do what she had to do. Mm-hmm. She didn't have anything other than what she needed, and then she would leave. I don't know how she opened the tomb and got in and out, or even if there was a closing door. It seems like the door would close. It really does. But I couldn't begin to tell you. Mm-hmm. Maybe it just curved or something.
The simplicity of it and the more natural, organic state everything has me thinking the Dark Hat. Now, there's one that pretty much everything falls under, the Kala, which is the majority ethnic group practices. So that's first, and then everything kind of splits.
Oh. Well, it just seems to me that her clothing wasn't like elaborate. It was just simple, plain clothing. So according to what I have in front of me, it would have been respectful and ceremonial, but relatively simple, marking her as an apprentice caretaker rather than a full shaman. Apparently, there would have possibly been a blue kadog as an important element of her ritual attire, but I didn't really get a good sense of her clothing, so I couldn't begin to tell you if she was wearing anything like that. When it comes to her, I just more had a sense of her being and of her being an entity, so there was no really good glimpse of her. She woke me. I know that much. This girl's attentions, possibly it may have been the newness. It could also have been that she has grown into a very powerful shaman in her own right by now, at which point I applaud her. I'm looking up Kadog. Oh, sometimes it's spelled Kata. Khata. Traditional ceremonial scarf used throughout Mongolia, Tibet, and other parts of Central Asia. It's apparently a really distinctive part of their culture. It's usually made of silk. It's long and rectangular, about 3 to 5 feet long and 1 foot wide. The traditional ones come in specific colors, blue, white, and yellow. Each color has its own meaning. The blue ones are particularly sacred in Mongolia, representing the eternal sky deity Tengri.
Okay, that's how you say the name.
I don't know how you say
it. Or something.
They have distinctive fringe at both ends, and some will have auspicious symbols or mantras woven into the fabric, which means that these things are woven from the start to be this. That's pretty awesome. They aren't just worn, they're actively used in rituals. The person would fold it over their hands when handling sacred objects or drape it around their shoulders when approaching sacred spaces. The blue kadog, if she wore it, would have been essential for her ritual visits. She would have used it both as a sign of respect to me and as protection for herself during this interaction between worlds. When she approached the burial site, she would have held it respectfully in both hands, almost like a bridge between her world and the spirit realm. That's pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, that's the Tengi, the eternal blue sky.
Eternal blue sky, Tengi.
Yeah, is the part of the core beliefs. They, or whichever, is the supreme deity and ruler of heaven, and yes, associated with blue.
Did you find anything else about, besides that they were this really awesome sky being?
Another word for Mongolian shamanism is Tengriism.
Oh, so they are devout to this particular being.
Mm-hmm. Eternal blue sky, animism, balance with spirits, ancestral spirits, and Himori, wind horse, which is a
wind horse.
Yeah, which is a person's psychic power or life force.
So their concept of chi, or medicine, according to my people, is a horse.
Yeah.
How apt is that? Because we also sometimes associate it with horses and bears and foxes, but horses too. I have that blue is Tengri's domain, the eternal sky. It's a sacred color. Blue items create a connection to Tengri's power. Royal association. Mongolian nobility used blue in their attire to show their connection to Tengri. So every time that we see a modern painting of one of the royalty of Mongolia, like, say, the big guy, Genghis, and he's not wearing blue, that might not be correct. Blue represents eternity, vastness, and spiritual power. Apparently, the deceased spirit is believed to journey through Tengri's realm. That's kind of cool, but anyway, it's also stepping way out of line. So I think we've covered all we can of the girl. So basically, according to the actual evidence that's out there of this vision that people said I was nuts about, I was being dealt with by an apprentice. She possibly was definitely too young to have stepped up to full power. But she, I would say, at least entrusted enough and good enough to be able to do something so important as caring for the dead. So maybe she had just went up to level 2 or something. I don't know how they do their levels. I don't think we're going to find that easily. But she had apparently at least earned it, or something had happened, so she had to take it up. Since it was her, possibly that also means it couldn't have been just anybody. Because I don't know how many apprentices a shaman can take. You know, I've always been under this impression that you get one. But maybe that's the movies that do it, because that doesn't seem very efficient to only have one that you pass things to.
They take them in a rotation, like you work a apprenticeship, you become an apprentice, learning the practical skills, and once you complete your apprenticeship, you go on.
So they do take more than one, they just don't do more than one at a time. We don't want to assume here. It would be really wrong of us to assume.
Yeah.
So we've covered the girl, and that's pretty awesome. Let's go next to what's the next part of the vision that comes first, and that would be what I see. The first thing I see, which would be the weapons. The weapons were actually lined up along the wall. My research revealed that they do that on purpose. Especially if this person was a high-ranking warrior, they would actually put their weapons in line of sight, because believing that the person's going to come back to life, they really needed the weapons to be the first thing they see. There is a hint in what I saw that they believe the people will come back to life in time of need. So they wouldn't have been like personal weapons. It wouldn't have been like, these are her favorite spears. By the way, I'm saying her because I'm female, but there's a chance that was a guy in the tomb over there. I have no sense of what sex I would have been. And I know a lot of people are like, well, that was definitely a man because weapons, except there have been not many, but a few women warriors uncovered. Women warriors are in our histories, in our stories, and over there they also would have gotten a warrior's tomb if they were a warrior. Some burials of women that were also warriors also show that they served other roles, so they might have risen up to be a warrior for whatever reason, to defend the thing, or just because that was their calling for the time, or revenge, or menopause. Could have been menopause. My mom's menopause. Her weapons were pieces of furniture. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the spears. Now, all I remember is that the shield was round, kind of had a texture on it, so it could have been hammered to look that way, could have been dented a lot. It could have been any sort of metal. It was not wood. It was definitely metal. And the spears, all I really remember of them is that the heads were like a leaf, like triangular, but rounded. I don't remember if there was anything on the shafts, how they were attached. It wasn't like really clear. So it was like, I know there's a shield over there, and I know it's round, and I know there's spears over there, and I see the glimmer of the light on the heads, but I couldn't tell you really, really specific details. So what I've got for that part is that actually helps narrow down the type of tomb, which I knew that from when I was in the field. There's people who collect arrowheads. They collect arrowheads. There are these huge charts because arrowheads are specific to tribes. So it actually helps you place, this was made during this time. This was according to this tribe. This was this and that other. Same thing with moccasins, too. That's why I'm always saying that your moccasins are kind of like a Scottish kilt, which I know a lot of people just got really pissed at me for that one. Not necessarily in the Scottish persuasion, if you know what I mean, but you would have specific moccasin styles according to tribe. The spears, according to what has been found, apparently the Xiongnu, I'm never going to get that right, the Xiongnu typically had iron spearheads with a leaf-shaped blade, about 8 to 12 inches long. Let me see, how long is my hand? How long do you think that? I don't think that's 8 inches, but it was, I couldn't tell you if it was longer than my hand. Possibly a little longer than, definitely not shorter than the length of my hand. Mounted on wooden shafts made of birch or pine, roughly 6 to 7 feet in length. I couldn't tell you what they were on that part. These spears, if it was this type of tomb, would have represented both military prowess and authority. They are symbols of command and leadership. That's new. Yes. And Parakeet has had commentary on that. I'm not sure what that commentary meant, but with her PhD, I'm pretty sure it was very profound. The shields are distinct from Chinese designs. The Xiongnu shields were made of wooden frames covered with leather, often cowhide, sometimes reinforced with metal strips along the edges. The shape was typically round or oval, measuring approximately 2 to 3 feet in diameter. I'm measuring with my hands now. That'd be about right. Apparently, they might feature painted designs, red, black, and white, a metal boss, which is the central protrusion. So if you see like a picture of one of those round seals that's got that little metal round circle in the middle, that is a metal boss. And the leather straps on the back. You've seen it you saw me construct one once because I made it for that group that we were hanging with the SCA. Mm-hmm. In elite Xiongnu burials, which I'm sticking in Xiongnu because a lot of the evidence kept pointing to that, so that's where I've gotten most of the information I've got is from Xiongnu. Mm-hmm. Weapons were arranged in specific ways that had deep spiritual significance. The upright positioning. Spears were often placed standing upright, not laid flat. This was believed to keep them ready for the deceased to use in the afterlife. Line of sight placement. Shields were deliberately positioned within the deceased line of sight so they could see their defensive equipment immediately upon awakening in the afterlife. Protective function. The weapons weren't just for the deceased to use. They were believed to actively protect the burial from malevolent spirits. Mm-hmm. That's pretty freaking cool. Many Xiongnu weapons have been found in burials. The specific arrangement I saw is rarely preserved because most burial chambers collapsed over time, disturbing the original arrangement. Many tombs were looted. Organic materials like wooden spear shafts often deteriorated. So apparently the combination of spears and shields suggests that I was someone of military importance. Now that's important overall because if you're someone who's getting that kind of vision, but there's no way I could begin to tell you my name or who I was or what my function was. Mm-hmm. But the burial is telling me some really cool things that apparently I participated in the military somehow. Hopefully to the point that I was on campaign to have received that kind of honor. Otherwise, Lord have mercy, it's like getting a claiming valor when you don't deserve it, if you think about it.
Yeah.
I have a clue there as to my identity just because of the spears and the shield, and that's pretty cool. So let's move from the weapons to the spotted cat skin. Did you find anything about that?
No. I was not looking up burial rites directly. I was looking up general shamanism.
Apparently, it reinforces a high-status interpretation as such exotic imported items would only have been available to the elite. But I do have to say that possibly that's the case, but it also could have been a gift. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily mean that I was the bee's knees, mm-hmm. so much as someone somewhere out there might have thought I was the bee's knees. Or perhaps I did a favor, or somebody was guilty because their son killed me in a drunken rage over a block of cheese that had been imported, and it was really especially good cheese.
Or maybe you faced down that specific spotted cat. I
could have done that on a campaign. Mm-hmm. Possibly I was just having a hard time with camel spiders that week that I died, and I don't know. I'm throwing ideas out there. I cannot remember the color of the cat skin. I wish I could.
It had spots. cats.
The only reason why I remember the cat skin after all these years is because of that poem I had written about the burial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it at all now. I'm really glad that I at least wrote that much down.
Mm-hmm.
Like the water in the ear part. Don't remember that. You would think I would remember something so annoying as water dripping incessantly into my ear. Which ear was it? Did I tell you that much at least?
It rotates. Depending upon what side.
The cat skin wasn't something you'd wear. It was just a skinned cat skin. And it was just hung. So you can't picture it throwing over someone's shoulders or as a headdress or, I wonder if it could have been a headdress now that I think about it. In other burials, it would have been likely draped over the platform or the bed to create a prestigious resting surface, but that is not what I saw. I saw it draped or hanging, or draped to be hanging, off to my left. Its striking pattern would have made it a focal point of the burial chamber. Now that I think about it, yes. When you would enter, it would have been right in almost the line of sight. Like there would have been the body, and then they're right there. So somebody was doing feng shui in my tomb, man. The natural oils in the skin may have contributed to the preservation of the body in the dry cave environment, apparently. I don't know about that part either. I mean, maybe not. I don't know much about that. That's not something I studied in school. It's not something I've thought to examine. If it was a Xiongnu burial, it would possibly tie the burial to the early Silk Road period, 3rd century BCE to 1st century CE. So somewhere around there, possibly. The earliest organized long-distance trade across Eurasia. It might have a Persian connection. The most likely source of the spotted cat skin would have been Persia, which was known for hunting those kind of animals and trading their skins. So again, it could have been a gift. Such items were often exchanged as diplomatic gifts between rulers rather than simple trade goods, suggesting that I might have had political connections. Possibly. There's no guessing on that. I don't really like to assume those kind of things. I mean, it's fun to assume. It's fun to make jokes and tell people, I was the great princess Bloody Bloggy. But when it comes to actually tearing something apart, it's really good to just stick to the facts. It's really good to not assume and just say, this is this. But these particular events are so specific, and this particular information is so specific. That's why it's getting tied to this one period, because the layout of the tomb actually puts it to that period. Hopefully we'll get to where you can start sharing your information soon.
I'm not trained as an archaeologist. I'm trained as an all source information analyst. So while archaeologists are trained to not assume.
No, you're not supposed to. That's actually the first thing that I went to school for, Archaeology 101. And the first thing it taught us was, don't assume. And don't be ethnocentric, which is to say, don't go into someone else's culture expecting them to be just like you.
Mm-hmm.
And to think just like you, they're going to have practices that you're not going to agree with.
Whereas my training, assumptions are made on a scale based on the information and or facts provided, because I would be handing over, this is the assessment. I would highly assume that if you go into this area fully bedecked in your military uniforms and guns blazing, that would be an extremely bad idea.
I think
so
going into
don't
a Mongolian battle with guns blazing would have people a little concerned if it was during the Xiongnu period, don't you think? What is that thing you're holding, and why is it a mini cannon, and why is it firing things at me?
I was just giving a modern day example.
I know,
It's like, or if such and such tends to have this pattern of behavior, it is a likely assumption that this, and this could be a result.
So, direct evidence on this cat skin is apparently limited. There are some things that back up its situation, its existence, shall we say. There is Polasmak's Noin Ola excavations. The archaeologist Natalia Polasmak. Oh, I hate that I can't get these names right. It really bothers me. I wouldn't like it if they got my name right. They wouldn't, though, because my name is Katrina. Yeah, she led major excavations at Noin Ola, a significant Xiongnu burial site, documented various textiles and organic materials in her paper Clothes from the Xiongnu Wardrobe in 2020. While she doesn't specifically mention cheetah skins, she notes the presence of exotic materials obtained through trade networks. Bouquet's research on exotic animals. Theory Bouquet's work, Hunting with Cheetahs at European Courts in 2019, documents the historical trade of cheetah skins along the Silk Road. Karina, oh Lord have mercy. Karina, I am so sorry. Gromer and Constantina Saliari's Products of Animal Skin from Antiquity to the Medieval Period 2017 discuss how exotic animal skins were used as elite status markers across Eurasia, noting that archaeological preservation issues make direct evidence rare. Come to think of it, it is kind of interesting that it would have been there. Mm-hmm. How did it survive? Was it replaced? Was it a later gift? Was, I hate to say this, a faux skin? I don't think they would have done that, but then how did it survive?
The tomb was taken care of.
It was very well cared for
taken care of, and obviously it was not plundered.
No, it had not been plundered. Probably not still be plundered today. Organic materials like furs rarely survive thousands of years, especially in non-frozen environments. The cat skin actually helps seal the possible time period of Xiongnu, and as I said before, I'm not assuming Xiongnu, it's just literally all of the evidence points to that. Mm-hmm. No other burials matched the details, so that's why we keep going back to Xiongnu, because no other burials matched it, so I have nothing else to compare to. Mm-hmm. Apparently the Xiongnu controlled key segments of the early Silk Road trade, which also would back up the presence of the skin. Even the Chinese historical texts back it up. Apparently there were other steppe cultures from slightly later periods that have more definite evidence of exotic cat skin use. So that's interesting. The cat skin doesn't necessarily throw it out of the water of time period. It doesn't really matter about the time period, really. It doesn't really throw it out of the water so much as there's evidence that it could have been there. Mm-hmm. How it survived, your guess is as good as mine. Let's do the peaches and wine. What do you think? So to go to the peaches and wine, apparently these would have been prestigious imports to the Xiongnu culture specifically. I really need to find out if it was beyond that, to be honest, because everything I've got is Xiongnu. The golden peach is a prestigious import item in Mongolia during the Xiongnu period. Peaches were native in China and were considered a luxury item. If I were someone who couldn't get peaches but often like that, like a luxury, then yeah, I can see, I would like a peach right now, man. When's the last time I had a peach? Like last year? God, I would love a peach right now. I can see that. Yeah, I can suck on that pit. For the Xiongnu specifically, they were exotic imports that signified wealth and connections to Chinese culture. But if you're someone who's going around beating up villagers and stealing their peaches, well, I don't guess that matters much. Apparently, there's some historical evidence. Edward H. Schaefer's classic work, The Golden Peaches of Samarkand, documents how peaches were traded as luxury items along the early Silk Road routes. The archaeological evidence, they are rarely preserved, obviously, because they were perishables, but the historical records out of China document that peaches were among the tribute items sent to nomadic leaders. Now, when it comes to the wine, we have Han Dynasty tributes. The Chinese historical records mention wine as part of the tribute paid by the Han Dynasty to the Xiongnu rulers to maintain peace. So I'm guessing the Xiongnu were just assholes. I can say this.
I'm behaving.
Archaeological evidence. Wine vessels and containers have been found in Xiongnu elite tombs. I remember a container for the wine. I kind of want to say there was a plate, but I'm afraid I'll be imagining it with a cup. I don't want to go that far. Mm-hmm. My mind is supplying that, but am I doing it because I need to fill an empty space in my head? And logically, you'd put a little itty-bitty wine thing there with some cups? I mean, I can't vouch for that. Mm-hmm. The grape wine was a foreign luxury that signified cosmopolitan taste and international connections. But when I think of that wine, I don't picture wine like I drank tonight. Mm-hmm. Or that horrible, really bad wine that you tried to serve me. She gave me this wine. It was the most horrible wine. It was squeezed out of batteries and fermented in a battery jug and stepped on by women with stone feet to make this wine. It was the most acrid stuff. I could have possibly cleaned my battery contacts in my car with it.
I tried.
I think there's a hole in my stomach now from that wine. Anyway, when I think of the wine in that tomb, what I have in my head is a light golden color. Mm-hmm. It's not mead. I know mead. Consuming wine rather than local beverages was a way for the elites to distinguish themselves and display their access to distant trade networks. So basically, blood-covered pinky out, I have wine and you don't, peasant. The fact that I was craving these two items in my death throes with this child was that I was familiar with this particular taste and really would have preferred that, I think.
Instead of the blood and... Although
I liked the mare's milk and blood. It was definitely something that I had enjoyed and liked, but I really would have liked to have had a peach. What's left to examine here? Besides the cat trying to crawl into my lap because he wants more attention.
You can hear him.
Yeah, I know. You can hear him a mile away. Is that right, Quicksilver? If you can hear him, Quicksilver is a rare silver dust. They became an experimental breed 12 years ago, 15? Mm-hmm. Now there's only 4 left in the world. Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the last ones that was sired by
by the last survivor.
Yeah.
The people who had taken his siblings, his elder siblings, were supposed to get with the breeding to help survive the breed, but they all disappeared, and the best we're given to understand is they were all spayed and neutered, which effectively would have been part of the reason. Another reason why is there's this disease with cats now that actually that started happening right before the COVID crisis that kills them, and there's no vaccine for it. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It will swoop through your cats and kill them. Ain't that right, buddy? You're just so gentle. Yes, you are. I know he's coming for me to get into my lap because I literally will hear him a room away. Purring. There is no quiet stalking with these cats. They're coming for you, and they purr to let you know it is like the purr of death. So I think what's left? We have the mare's milk and blood, the pedestal, the placement. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the pedestal elevation of the corpse. As mentioned before, the corpse was on some sort of elevated surface, on a bed of something like furs, laid out very politely and regally the way we do our dead, not in the fetal position as we see in so many tombs. You often will find burials where the people are placed in fetal positions or curled up comfortably. This is not the way my body was laid. It was laid on its back like in some sort of King Arthur movie. On the back, in such a way that I could see the weapons. Now, I don't know if it's because I was looking at it like, with my head bent down, or because it was at an angle. I couldn't begin to tell you that. I just know that there was a sense of it being elevated from the floor by maybe a foot or two. Not too very high.
Important ceremonial ritual items used at the top of the list are rock ceremonial altars that are often mountain-shaped. That's the extent.
God!
That's the extent that I have on the platform.
Minnie Katz is not known for her mini informations.
I am too. It's just, yeah.
Okay, let's examine mountain-shaped really quick.
Mountain-shaped altars or mountain-shaped mounds.
Like a mesa?
That was not given as an example.
Okay.
It's just mountains are a really big, important deal. And that reflected in their ceremonial altars.
No, by who? There's so many tribes. Were you given a specific tribe?
Not specific.
Okay.
Specific. This is something that is universal.
Well, that's interesting.
Throughout the Mongolian Shamanism, aka Tingerism. Now, it can also be, I don't know how big this is, but traditionally, they are not very big fans of digging. They actively discourage it. So like digging a well or mines or burying the dead, that is something that they generally agree on because you're digging into the earth and it can very well displease the earth spirits.
That's pretty interesting.
Which they would rather not do.
I can say that there's an impression that this was a natural cave. Okay, so what I've got, the key aspect is that the body was not buried, like you had just mentioned about not digging. Placed above ground, on a platform, in a location designed for continued access. Obviously, otherwise, what was she going to do? Phase through the rock? This gives a connection to the sky. Maybe that's why the mountain? Because you're putting something on top of a mountain. I can see that. You're doing a symbolic connection to the sky. I could see that if that's correct, but we don't know. Placing your body on a platform was a way to honor you by bringing you closer to the heavens. Elevating the body is a way to visually honor the person, makes the body more visible, which is kind of, I guess it would be more visible if you were entering the cave, if you think about it, so that makes sense. Also, apparently, it facilitates spirit travel. May have symbolized a launching point for your spirit's journey to the afterlife. It allowed ongoing access to the body, which makes sense. There's a cat yowling in the background. That makes sense. But there aren't any direct references to the pedestal burials, what they're called. That's what it's called. It's called a pedestal burial. Mm-hmm. There aren't really any direct references among the Xiongnu specifically. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that doesn't match where everything else does. By elevated, if, let's say I was on fresh furs, then it could have been added later for all we know. We just don't know these things. We don't know how they do these things. I don't see them as adding something later, to be honest, because that might have been disrespectful. But since the elite burials were known for their displays of wealth and status, with the belief system and the fact that it would have helped preserve the body to be fed and cared for, then yeah, a tiny mountain would have kind of made sense, especially if it was universal. Mm-hmm. That's like 100% assumption we cannot really say for sure. Mm-hmm. Just that I know that the body was possibly 1.5 feet maybe or so up. Sounds like that part's really hard to track down.
Mm-hmm. Which would make sense.
Okay, so to discuss the actual placement of the body, which is where we're at now, the information I have in front of me, positioned at approximately a 40-degree angle from the entrance. The weapons were placed in direct line of sight. There was that spotted cat skin. There were the food offerings, usually off to the right. So it was like a rocky outcropping or something like that. Maybe, who knows, on a table, who knows. And then the entrance was off to the right. This apparently is significant. Cardinal directions held symbolic meaning. For the Xiongnu, like other steppe peoples, often orientated burials with consideration to cosmological beliefs. The 40-degree angle from the entrance suggests an intentional positioning rather than simple convenience. This is another thing that apparently parallels specifically the Xiongnu practices, though, which is why it also gets pinpointed to Xiongnu, with some unique elements, apparently. Cave setting. While the Xiongnu were best known for their large Kurgan-style burial mounds, cave burials were also utilized, particularly in the mountainous regions. And when I saw the terrain, there were low hills that would have been suitable for caves, so that makes sense. And they drove me to another cave and shoved me into the little teeny tiny apartment there. A similar cave burial from the 14th century was discovered at Sagan-Kad Mountain in Mongolia, suggesting a long-standing tradition of cave burials in the region. The arrangement of items around the body creates a ritual space that seems designed for continued interaction, which only makes sense. The caretaker could move around the body to provide grooming and offerings. This suggests the cave was not just a burial site, but a shrine, or ritual space, maintained for some time after death. But didn't you say that that was what they did? Mm-hmm. So I can't say, deity, oh yeah, I'm special, I'm the moth goddess. By the way, guys, I really am the moth goddess, but that's a long story there, and it involves the internet and AOL. And cashmere.
Oh yeah, what else is a moth goddess gonna eat? Only the finest cashmere. For her Majesty's taste buds.
You better believe it, or I will chew through your t-shirts.
With the animism, with all things having a spirit balance, keeping in balance with the spirits, and keeping in contact with the ancestral spirit. So, yes. Everything that you said. I'm trying to get her back on track.
But what I'm saying is just because it's a ritualistic sacred space does not mean that the person buried in that way would have been a deity. There was an example we were given that we had to take apart in school. We were given this description of this structure, which is basically a man-made area. And it was as if archaeologists had come and found it, and they described it. And you had to figure out what it was. And it was described in such a way that you would automatically assume it was like a shrine. Turns out, it was the description of, drumroll please, a bathroom. It's a lesson I took to heart. That's all I have on the placement of the body, was that it would have been like that, possibly on purpose. Mm-hmm. For the whole one to let her get in there to do what she's got to do. Their whole placement was ceremonial to start with. it was set up like a little itty bitty bedroom. So you've got that, you've got comfort, you've got possibly me facing the correct direction for some cardinal celestial situation. Maybe I just liked looking at the North Star. We just don't know. Maybe I fell face first and they were trying to correct an error. I tripped on somebody's toy. So I guess there's not very far we can go on the placement of the body when it comes to that. When it comes to non-Xiongnu burials, which is nice to be able to go beyond the Xiongnu on this, the Noan Ula burial mounds contain similar elite goods, but there's no mention of the position of the body. There's also been recent excavations at Alatay and Terezin that have shown Xiongnu burials with carefully positioned grave goods. If I wanted to try to find my identity somehow through the very scant records that somebody else might have written, that would be where I would probably start my focus first. But I don't know if there's any hope to it, to be honest, of discovering. I don't think there would be. I don't think I would ever find my name, for example.
Yeah.
I'd have to get a hold of that girl. One thing I did try to find is if my name would have been passed down in my life story. So the only way I could possibly reliably know who I was and what I possibly did that wasn't exaggerated the way people do would be to ask her or somebody in her family and hope they would be willing to tell me. That just puts the chances down to like 0.1%, doesn't it? So I guess we'll move on from the placement of the body because we're not really getting a lot out of that, except that it still points to the Xiongnu. So the mare's milk.
Milk, alcohol, and or other items were common offerings.
Well, there's two drinks. There's just mare's milk, and then there's the mare's milk and blood. Don't know the significance of it just being mare's milk because that's not what I was handed. But I do know mare's milk and blood was reserved for special things. Like the elite. Like somebody who you feel guilty that your great-grandfather had them trip over their freaking toy spear. Or got bit in the face by a camel spider. I know there were not camel spiders there. Just go with it here, okay? I don't like camel spiders. Possibly antagonized the spotted cat and got mauled. Or mare's milk, also known as areg or komis. I said it wrong again. I am so bad. That's why I'm trying to get tipsy so I can at least say I was drunk. Apparently, the mare's milk holds a profound cultural and ritual significance in Mongolian and Central Asia nomadic traditions. Sacred, quote-unquote, white food.
As in the food is white?
What other color do you think milk would be? And if it came out the other color, wouldn't you be a little worried?
Well, there's also Mongolian Shamanism, but this is probably a more modern classification, can be categorized into 3 types: white, black, and yellow. Yeah, these distinctions reflect historical transformations and influences of other religions. What I'm taking from that is the categories are pretty much like a timestamp. It's like yellow is heavily influenced by Buddhism and Lamism. Now,
not llamas like llamas like in like.
But also a key feature of the Bariat traditions, which is known for their elaborate hierarchy of deities and spirits. White shamans serve benevolent deities, and there seems to be a distinction, while black shamans deal with more dangerous spirits. So it's not necessarily that they deal with evil. Yeah, they Ghostbusters. If you're having issues with malevolent spirits, you're going to want someone that's well versed in the black category of shamanism. That's not necessarily that, again, that they're evil. It's just that's their specialty.
And that's the thing about a lot of people that I've met over here. So I don't want to say Western culture entirely because I don't know how far this black and white need goes. But you see so many people who they immediately assume that just because you deal with the underside of stuff that's not, say, Jesus or you know, Tangria, well, you must be dealing in black magic and evil, and it's like, no, yeah. I just have a different crowd I run with, and that doesn't mean nothing more than that.
Yeah, what I was looking through seemed to indicate that if you did come across a more polarized view of good and evil, then that's usually an indication that it's been influenced by
outside influences. Would it, like, for example, you mentioned animism, which we haven't covered because it hasn't really played a part in tearing apart this vision. That particular point of view is so far removed, you get people from the outside who don't understand it. That also suggests that if a person were to say, come and care for the tomb, that if they had that point of view, they would be somebody who would be influenced. Which is hard to reconcile someone who's influenced with the black and white, modern, more influenced outsider to come and care for the dead, because so many of these religions view caring for the dead as a dirty, filthy, unclean practice. Chances are that actually ups the chances that she was very traditional. Apparently in Mongolian culture, dairy products are collectively known as sagan idi, or white food, considered pure and sacred. Mare's milk fermented into arag or kolmis holds a special status among these. As a ritual offering, it has been used as a primary offering in various ceremonies for thousands of years. Thousands of years. We don't know how many thousands. I am not told how many thousands. Archaeological evidence suggests the consumption of horse milk dates back, I guess I'm about to be told, to at least the Bronze Age in Mongolia around 1200 BCE, coinciding with the adoption of mounted horseback riding. The ability to produce the fermented mare's milk indicated wealth and status, as it required owning mares and the specialized knowledge to collect and ferment the milk properly. That is true. Those suckers do not have the udders of a milk cow. For nomadic peoples, mare's milk represented life, prosperity, and the bond between humans and horses. Its whiteness symbolized purity, and its fermentation process, which produces alcohol, gave it spiritual properties. Are you starting to get the sense that I was an alcoholic? Because I'm starting to get the sense that I was an alcoholic.
I mean, there's a time when you were.
Oh, gee, thanks. I am not an alcoholic. Like,
well, currently, I'm more of an alcoholic.
She's very much an alcoholic, man. The use of blood in ritual contexts among Central Asian nomadic peoples had several dimensions. Life force, not the movie. Blood was considered the embodiment of life force. Offering blood to the deceased or to spirits was a way of transferring vital energy. So she was basically keeping me alive, maybe? Question mark? Doink, doink. Blood-milk combination, which is what I was receiving. The specific combination of mare's milk and blood has historical precedence. Some nomadic groups consumed a mixture of blood and milk, sometimes from the same animal, in ritual context. The practice combined the purity of milk with the vitality of blood. The offering of both milk and blood to the deceased provided symbolic nourishment for their journey to the afterlife. This reflects beliefs in an afterlife where the deceased would need sustenance. But I was long dead. But in the Xiongnu funerary practices, there was the elite offerings that contained evidence of the food and drink offerings, including vessels that may have held the mare's blood and other substances. Apparently, the Noan Ola burial mounds contained Chinese bronze vessels likely used for such offerings, which is what I keep thinking was to my right, was something to that effect. But again, I might have been imagining that. I might be imagining that. I cannot say that part for sure.
Results inconclusive.
Continued nourishment, the practice of continuing to provide food and drink to the deceased after burial, aligns with beliefs that the deceased remained present in some form and required sustenance. Technically, yes, I do remain present in some form. You have to stop and ask yourself then, am I able to sense the body because there are rituals keeping me tied to it? Or am I just tied to it? And her going in there, thinking of me and feeding me, tendrilled her to me, the way magic will do. That would mean she was very strong. I hope she's okay. Apparently, the practice of continued offerings is documented in various Central Asian cultures. So that's not just the Xiongnu. That's more than one culture, which is interesting. Also, with blood rituals, while direct archaeological evidence of blood offerings is limited, as blood doesn't preserve well for some strange reason, historical text and ethnographic parallels suggest blood played an important role in Xiongnu rituals. Chinese historical sources mention blood oaths and sacrifices. The combination of mare's milk, representing purity, prosperity, and the domesticated realm, with blood, representing vitality, sacrifice, in the wild realm, created a powerful symbolic offering that bridged different aspects of their worldview. So it's kind of like a yin-yang drink. That just makes me want to try it even more. I'm like, shoot, I might like this stuff. But as a cultural significance to pouring it over my rotted, non-existent lips. It represents a holistic offering that combines elements considered essential to life on the steppe. The products of domesticated animals, the milk, and the life force itself, the blood, reflects Xiongnu's complex cosmology that integrated various aspects of nomadic life and belief systems. The continued offering of these substances to the deceased suggests a belief in an ongoing relationship between the living and the dead, where the deceased remained present in some form and required ritual attention. What's another note I've got here is, my preference for peaches and wine over mare's milk and blood is culturally significant. It suggests the deceased may have been someone who had adopted some Chinese tastes or preferences. What if I was just actually Chinese? Maybe I had married in. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no way to know. I would like that. Short of having another past life vision like that one that I've already done a podcast over. Mm-hmm. There's no way to know. I mean, so far all the evidence says that this person, whoever I was, wasn't just nobody. Mm-hmm. I think the mare's milk and blood is probably the most significant part of the whole thing. Like, you've got your weapons and you've got the placement and everything, and these are all things that maybe, somebody might have earned that wasn't elite. Mm-hmm. But then you've got the mare's milk and blood that is actively being given. There's so many possibilities here of why she suddenly started coming. Maybe she knew it was there as she saw the tomb and took it upon herself to pick up a tradition and noticed that the tomb was being ignored. And did like I do cemeteries, and this grave needs cleaning, and I'll clean off a grave. I mean, even if it was a boring story, this dude lived, and he punched a guy in the face. But the guy was a particularly big asshole, so everybody loved him for it. Maybe he was an old guy, and he had his spear, and he would sit there and poke you from the back of the room. Give me a drink, sonny. And people just assumed he was a warrior when he died because he had this spear, and what it really was is he had found it lying around where it had fallen over and nobody picked it back up again and he took it. People do funny things. I shouldn't be making fun of him, but I can. I'm making fun of myself. So I think we've covered everything about the burial. Because now we can discuss a bit more about the Mongolian shamanism, knowing that we're going to be segueing to the tomb getting moved. But now is the time that we can go over what you have not managed to force in there as a derailment with your train of horses.
Stop. Well, now I don't want to talk.
Oh, yeah, now she doesn't want to talk about it. Ah, I see.
Anyway, yeah, a shaman's role would be communication with the spirit world and the regular world, healing, predicting the future, conducting rituals to balance or maintain the balance of the world, and providing offerings and or protection from malevolent spirits.
Sounds like just about what everybody, that's like a worldwide thing, except maybe you might be called a medicine man, or you might be called a magician, or just crazy lady on the beach. Yeah,
ceremonies include trance states, spirit possession, and individual one-on-one consultations.
I'm actually trying to picture if they had to bring a gift, because I know that with medicine people you would bring, say, depending on the tribe, but for me it would be tobacco wrapped in red cloth.
No, that might be covered more in detail. This is just the skimming of the notes. Mm-hmm. So, and as I was saying before, the Soviet era that started in 1924 all the way up to 1990 did a lot of
destruction.
So suppression.
So was it on purpose? Were they being persecuted?
Yes.
How? Were they being killed, persecuted? Or did missionaries come in? How did it happen?
I cannot recall any specifics about there being killings, but the practices were not allowed to be practiced. The information was suppressed, if not flat out just destroyed. A lot of it was family tradition based. They just weren't allowed to practice.
Did they do it in secret? How did it come back? Because it's made a revival.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, some of the information was kept from destruction, and ceremonies. Stuff was taught and practiced in secret. It's not necessarily a complete information picture. Key elements to the revival was knowledge recovery, and of course that also leads to authenticity debates. There's also been a lot of syncing up with Buddhism and Buddhist traditions, and in some ways that's how they manage to survive in a way is syncing up with Buddhism. Not like appropriation or anything, it's just,
cultural exchange.
Yeah. They're there, and it's a way for us to keep our traditions and practices alive by syncing them up with this one over here that's not under as much of a threat. So yeah, today's Mongolian shamanism is often practiced alongside Buddhism. There are professional organizations. Traditional ceremonies are being revived. They are doing their best to reconstruct traditional practices as best they can. With the modern age being as it is, there are formal organizations that I can list, and with modernization, you get many different forms, ritual practices, urban adaptations that take, traditional practices and adapt them to a more urban, modern day sensibility. So ritual practices, urban adaptations, shamanism, Mongolian shamanism is seen as a cultural heritage, and it is also used as a therapeutic resource. As I was trying to hijack in before.
Hijacking.
Mongolian shamanism can be categorized into 3 types: white, black, and yellow. Yellow is heavily influenced by Buddhism and Lamaism, particularly Buddhism. That's why it's called yellow. Mostly because a lot of stuff in Buddhist temples is yellow.
Okay.
2 main traditions that tend to have the focus of the modern revival is the dark hat, which is a more natural and simplistic in their practices. They are more family-based. It's also considered the most accurate, pure, least changed.
I do have to wonder if the girl that was coming to the tomb was one of those, or was she someone who was one of the ones that was trying to pick it back up again, and that's why the tomb had been so quiet until she came along. Either which way, she had power. Good girl. We should probably move to the moving of the tomb, though. As already discussed, it was hurriedly moved by 3 men who loaded things up, and they did it. I'm remembering it wasn't like a 5-minute move. I remember it took a day. Mm-hmm. I was aware of it happening all day long. I was even, trying to, place, what hour is it over there? What's the time zone? Looking at the sun, trying to look by the light. I don't remember enough now. But apparently there is an organization who their entire mission is to rescue endangered burial sites. They're called Nomad. They use old Soviet trucks and other things, one of which might match the description of the truck that carried me, and they will move endangered sites and rehide them. So possibly these guys work with Nomad. Now, how did they know it was there? Did the girl tell them what was happening to the region? I don't know. I just know that there was very much a sense of urgency. It was almost like it was a last-minute decision for them. Something definitely had come up very quickly within the girl's last visit and them coming. They were in a hurry. They moved as quick as they could. They were, going. So going back, the modern context of the tomb relocation. So now we're in modern times. The time period that I suspect it happened in, because I don't remember, happens to be during a time that there was some upheaval happening over there, and a whole lot of tombs got relocated or rescued, gathered up by archaeologists. I don't understand what was happening with the upheaval. I don't know what was going on. I've only found this was happening. Can you tell me more? No. Kind of like we can't tell you of the 33 counties in Illinois that are trying to become part of Indiana or become their own state. We don't want you to know them. We're only going to give you 7 of them, but I want to know about the rest. What about the other 16? So, modern context of tomb relocation. 3 men hurriedly moved the burial using an old army green truck, taking it deeper into the hills away from civilization and placing it in a smaller cave. There are several important contextual elements. Dun, dun, dun. Timing. This period coincides with significant changes in Mongolia that directly impacted archaeological sites. After the fall of communism in Mongolia in 1990, which is about when you said they started reconstructing things, so the fall of the USSR enabled them to reconnect with themselves. Mm-hmm. Possibly. There was a surge in unregulated archaeological exploration and looting. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. The early 2000s saw increased international archaeological interest in Mongolia with numerous expeditions. I was even going to go on one, the one where they had found what they called an Amazon woman, and I was going to go. But 1, I couldn't get the money together, and 2, I realized I would have to leave the kids behind. And so I chose not to further my career for my thing. Climate change began accelerating permafrost melt. The water dripping in my ear. Exposing previously protected burials. The hurried, almost panic nature of the relocation suggests several possible motivations. Protection from looters, avoiding official discovery, which not only makes sense because the burial was not moved to a building. It was not moved to a camp where archaeologists were laying, where you have like your areas where you keep stuff. No, it was moved further away from civilization, deeper, and shoved somewhere unceremoniously. Hope they didn't break my legs. Avoiding official discovery. In many Mongolian communities, there are strong beliefs about not disturbing the dead. The relocation may have been motivated by a desire to protect the burial from disturbance. They may have been hiding it temporarily, planning to return later to remove valuable items for sale. Now that comes up, I do remember a sense of that I would get to go back to my spot. Maybe there was somebody coming through. Method of relocation, the use of an army green truck is significant. Old military vehicles are common in rural Mongolia after being repurposed. Okay. So that's in a lot of regions. I mean, that's not surprising. There was a lack of roads, which is typical for those regions. The fact that they moved the entire burial instead of just grabbing all the valuable stuff is evidence of a concern for preservation and not looting. Mm-hmm. In other words, if they wanted to loot, they would have left me there. Mm-hmm. They might have taken my furs, maybe. I would have been all cold, on top of having water dripping into my fucking ear. So we got traditional protection practices, local guardianship. In many regions of Mongolia, local communities have traditionally taken responsibility for protecting these areas. Since the 1990s, Mongolia has lost thousands of sites to looting. Thousands. That's terrible. Mm-hmm. That is terrible. And on an archaeological front, I want to be curious. I want to be able to see the artifacts, but I want to be respectful about it. In my opinion, going to, say, that tomb would be no different than, say, going to somebody else's bedroom. And, oh, wow, you like the Beatles. Mm-hmm. Then leave it where it was found. Digging up something, when you dig in the ground, that's very destructive. So you have to do it by layers and you reconstruct as you go. And that can't be helped. But this particular tomb would have been able to be treated with a bit more respect than that. Mm-hmm. Because of the way it was put together. Apparently the country's vast territory makes official protection nearly impossible. Which would explain why the communities are stepping up and doing it. There are documented cases in Mongolia that parallel aspects of what I have described. In the early 2000s, several cave burials in the Gobi Altai region were relocated by local herders to protect them from looters that had begun targeting the area. Okay. So if I wanted to try to get more information, I might look into the Gobi Altai region. That sounds interesting. After the discovery of the frozen Pazyryk-type tombs in western Mongolia, local communities took steps to protect other potential sites from both looters and official archaeological expeditions. The Sagan Kad mountain cave burial from the 14th century was protected by local herders who kept its location secret for generations before archaeologists documented it in 2015. In northern Mongolia, salvage archaeology teams have documented cases where local people moved archaeological materials to protect them from looting or development. Salvage archaeology. Now that's a new term for me, salvage archaeology. There's also the cultural significance that you were actually alluding to. Contested heritage. Archaeological remains are caught between different value systems. Scientific research, cultural spiritual significance to local communities, economic value to looters, and national heritage concerns. There's the local agency. The actions of the three men represent local agency in heritage protection, taking direct action rather than waiting for official intervention. In a sense, their actions represent a modern continuation of the original care shown to the deceased, protecting them from disturbance and maintaining their dignity even across centuries. You know, that's really nice. So that leads us to Nomad. Nomad Science, the Northern Mongolia Archaeology Project. They were originally called that in MAP, but now they're Nomad. I don't know what Nomad stands for. But they apparently were not active in the early 2000s in its current form. So they probably were not tied to Nomad, these three guys. Mm-hmm. INMAP was established around 2011 and then later renamed Nomad Science. So I think 2011 is too late, because you had mentioned that you came along in 2007. So what's more likely as a result is that these guys could have been local herders or community members. It's basically grassroots protection. And it's apparently more common, which only makes sense. Because if you think about it, when you're isolated away from, say, the official feds, you're going to be an organization on your own. So we don't know who these guys were, but they were doing their job and they did good and they moved efficiently and they didn't break nothing as far as I know. No complaints. I mean, who else is going to get three guys to suddenly help you move your house at the last minute?
10 would recommend.
Thank you, guys. Today, Nomad Science engages in salvage archaeology to protect sites from looting and environmental damage. Essentially a formalized scientific version of what those guys did. Dr. Julia Clark and Nomad Science have documented how local people often take measures to protect archaeological sites before formal archaeological teams arrive. How do they know they're coming? I know that in some places you get permits and everything. Mm-hmm. In this case, is so far removed, I wonder how they knew they were coming. In some cases, these local protection efforts have preserved sites that would otherwise have been destroyed. But the way it was handled represents a grassroots approach to heritage protection that continues today. They are still doing this today in Mongolia, despite the fact that the regime has changed, and it's probably more with Nomad. Okay, so let's sum up. Everything was backed by science and evidence and history. Everything. Mm-hmm. Except possibly what was one detail that was not completely backed. It was the cat skin, I think. Mm-hmm. For a vision from a crazy person, that's pretty astounding. What's really amazing to me is that I knew absolutely hardly a damn thing about Mongolian shamanism before I got curious and started re-exploring this memory because I was just curious one day.
Yeah, that's just been in the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's just been in the last few days I got curious and put it out in the ether and started asking questions and started getting answers, and it was shock and awe and amazement. And then she started doing the hard, heavy research for me, and I looked around a little bit. This really, really has a cement backing, so that this event actually has some really good, I don't know. I don't have a word for it. One, I'm not crazy. Mm-hmm. No matter what people said when I had the vision and entrusted them with information, and they publicly told people I was crazy over it and used my trust to hurt me. 2, I'm not crazy. 3, if you also are having a vision like that and you think, oh my God, I'm losing my mind, maybe doing a little bit of research. If it's on a topic you know nothing about and it turns out that everything is true that you're seeing, and there's absolutely no reason that it would be in your subconscious, then chances are it's a true vision. And there's no getting around it. This was a true vision. This was a true event. I have never been interested in Mongolian shamanism. Never. I have had people try to push me towards it, as I mentioned in the last podcast, but I am not interested in becoming a Mongolian shaman. I like hearing the throat music. I like the headdresses, and I like the way you see them dressed, but this is all Hollywood pictures you see now. So they're pretty, but I don't resonate with them. Mm-hmm. They're not my culture. But that just gives me a firmer foundation of, wow, this has to be real. Because I haven't ever even watched a freaking movie with a Mongolian shaman in it that I'm aware of. It's just not something that's ever been in my personal sphere to capture in.
Yeah, maybe the vaguely closest you've gotten was the time that we went to the Buddhist temple.
That's not even. Well, there was that time I looked into Santa Claus because of the connection with Santa Claus and the mushrooms on how the Christmas, one of the hypotheses of why the Christmas tree is how it is. Because with the Christmas tree, the very first ornaments were bird nests and red things with spots that represented mushrooms. There is a theory that shamans would go out collecting the Amaskara mushroom and they would set them on the bough branches to dry, and that's where the tradition of decorating the tree comes from. And so now I have a mushroom tree every year because that's just really cool. I'd never ever covered the headdresses, and I mean, I might know a tad bit about the initiation ceremony that I'm just like, yeah, no, that's just not for me. I'll drink some wine, but drinking something to purposefully throw up and have a vision, thanks, my days are like that without throwing up. I'll just stay crazy and without that. Thanks very much. Have a good day. No, thank you. I don't need it. I genuinely don't need it, very clearly. The biggest point to this, besides the fact that it's just a really wild ride, this is a really wild ride to have something so large and profound happen in your life, and even after the persecution I got from it, there it is. Live and real and verifiable as all shit. That's just freaking amazing. So that I can pass this to you, possibly if you have an experience similar to this, before you start popping pills, read a book. I'm not saying that somebody might not need to pop pills. I've got that family member that has to pop pills.
I have to pop pills.
She pops pills. But I'm once again vindicated for like the 15th time in the past 3 months. It's been happening more and more the more I dive into this, which is the point of the podcast. So I hope that the information that we have shared a little boringly this time with you is helpful, if not enlightening. I want this to help you to realize that if you're on a similar journey, stay strong. There's probably a reason for it. I don't know the reason for my vision, except that there was a young girl who clearly had some power, who clearly had a bright future as a shaman ahead of her, not bothering to get the water out of my ear! Get the water out of my ear! Get out of my ear! That's not bothering me these days. Ever since the tomb was moved, all connection has been lost. I don't know if she has visited. I don't know if they've put it back. I probably could remote view and reconnect to find out if I wanted to. But do I want to? I might end up disappointed. Is it going to change the history of anything? I don't think so. It's not going to be a profound thing. However, if the message does get of the fact that I was aware of her visits to that young lady, who now would be probably a mother even, then I want her to know that I truly appreciated her visits. That if she picks it up again, it's okay to talk to me. As a matter of fact, it's a little creepy to me when people don't. Because where I come from, that kind of silence is a sign of disapproval. And that I hope to see her or somebody else involved again. And that the care that has clearly happened over a long period of time is greatly appreciated. I don't think the way I was given the impression in the very beginning all those ages ago that bag of bones is going to step up and come back to life. Really cool thing about skeletons, we're all scared of moving skeletons. How are they moving? They ain't got no muscles.
Or tendons.
Or tendons.
Or ligaments.
Or ligaments. Magic does it.
Power of your mind.
The very force of will from my horse.
The wind horse.
The wind horse will carry my bones as I walk along.
Him or I. Psychic power or life force.
But I don't think that's what's going to happen. However, if you're listening to this, I actually, if you think about it, did come back to life because I'm sitting here in this chair giving you this message through this podcast a message of thanks. I did come back to life, and if there's one thing that I would like to get from that life back then is possibly that person was braver than I am now, because I am such a coward now. And so I think about those kind of lives that I have led way back, and I reflect how I wish I could be that kind of brave. So I look back on those lives, and I say that if there was one thing that I could get from those lives, I wish it was their kind of bravery.
Do you have any idea how much more shit and trouble you would be in if you had that level of bravery?
No, I really don't. I feel like I'd be in less shit and trouble. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that would have had to back down because I would have had the bravery to hold the line. I feel like I would have led a different life. But that's a nature versus nurture argument. Those people would have also led different kinds of lives to facilitate that kind of bravery. Mm-hmm. And the life I led here did not allow any sort of bravery to be nurtured. So I thank everybody that helped that. And who knows, maybe by continuing to dive into those warrior lives, I will find something inside of me that says, I can be brave now, only for something to probably stomp on it and go, oh yeah, Godzilla on Bambi, squash! All right, so I guess I'll wrap this up. Thank y'all very much for listening. And thank you very much for combing my hair and feeding me mare's milk and blood. And guys, just one more note. I really, really, really would like a peach right about now.